Okay, my name is Shelby. A lot of you know me. I'm a coordinator in education abroad. And also with me is Megan. Megan, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan. Like Shelby said, I'm also a coordinator here. I know I've met with a few of you, and yeah, I'm really excited for all of you to go in your programs this summer.
Great. Some of you have sat through this presentation before. It's a little bit different this year, obviously. But yeah, if you have any questions, please do put your hand up, put something in the chat. Megan's going to be moderating, but we want to make sure that all of your questions are answered before you go abroad. All right, first and foremost, you are studying abroad. Remember that you're earning credits and grades from everything that you're taking through your program. So that means that it will affect your GPA once you're back in the States and it comes back on your WVU transcript. As a, just general good practice, I recommend that you keep hold of your syllabi and any coursework, like assignments that you're doing through your program, just so that you have kind of that record of what you did and what each of your courses entailed, if you're planning on earning credit for it. Of course, electronic copies take less baggage space. While you're abroad, don't forget about your mixed email address. We're still going to be in touch with you with important reminders about getting your credits transferred, about what's going on in your country. Also, if you want to shoot us pictures while you're there, we love seeing what you're up to. So don't forget about us. We've talked to some of you guys about the credit transfer process. This is a little bit involved, so I'm kind of going to go through it step by step. If you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to reach out and ask me. Most of this information is coming from the registrar's website. So if you go to registrar.wvu.edu/transfer, you should find everything here. Kind of first and foremost is the question of course equivalency. If you're planning on taking a course abroad and having it directly transfer as the same thing as a WVU course. For example, if you need a Psych 293 class here at WVU and you're planning on taking it through your program this summer, then you can take the syllabus from that course, upload it to this transfer equivalency review request system, or TER, and have it evaluated by a WVU faculty member. So if you're taking courses and you just want to know what the equivalency would be here at WVU, you can kind of funnel them through that system and find out what that equivalency would be. Now, a lot of times, if you're taking something really interesting, and like I had a student go to Peru and take shamanism and herbal remedies or something, take that class, that's super cool and interesting. It won't have an equivalency here at WVU. You're still earning credits and grades. What you'll get back if you put it through TER is this doesn't have an equivalent at WVU. You'll get, a sociology or anthropology credit, like 200 or 300 level transfer credit. Okay. So really what this comes down to is really what this comes down to is the code that comes back onto your WVU transcript at the end of everything. If you take a course abroad and you do not put it through TER to be evaluated, you'll see it on your transcript at the end of everything with this code, NOEQ 100, and the course title. So if you're taking shamanism and herbal medicine, for example, and you don't have it evaluated, then you would see on your transcript, NOEQ 100, shamanism and herbal remedies, right? Okay. Make sure that you're in contact with your academic advisor here at WVU so that they know what classes you're planning on taking. They know what to expect when you're finished with everything and where it will fall in your degree works. Okay. Does this make sense for everybody? All right. Kind of the second part of this credit transfer step is the transient form. So this is a mandatory form. In order to get credits back from your experience, you need to fill out this form. I'll have a picture of it on the next slide. But first and foremost, read the instructions and sign the first page. The second page, you're going to fill out with the course information through your program. So fill in your student information, your institution that you're studying at. So if you're studying at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, for example, put in Stellenbosch University, and then put in the course information as it would appear at that university. Okay, so if you're taking shamanism and herbal medicine, put in whatever course code they might have, and then whatever that course title is. Okay, so this should have the classes listed as you would see them on the transcript that you received from that school. Okay. Different countries measure credits differently. If you're traveling through like an affiliated provider like ISA, AIFS, it'll probably have similar credits there and here. Like your courses might be 3 credits there, and also here. Some other programs like Stellenbosch, for example, might have different, quantities associated with their course credit hours. Okay. If you have questions about how that transfer scale works, we're happy to help. Also, this is not the end all be all. People will be checking your work to make sure that the credits you put in actually are equivalent to what you're saying they are. Okay. So this transient form we'll email out to you. Okay. We will make sure that you are sent the transient credit information. After this meeting, I recommend filling it out once you've actually registered for classes at your institution. Does that make sense? You have a plan now, that plan might change a little bit, and that's totally fine. If you fill this out and you change a class, that's also okay. You can submit a new transient form with the additional class that you've added or changed. Okay. Once you've filled out this transient form, you need to submit it to your academic advisor. Okay. They will upload it online, and that's certifying it. It'll then go to the dean of your department and they certify it. And then the registrar will email you and say, congratulations, your transient form was approved. Make sure your transcript gets to education abroad. Okay. Any questions about the transient form? All right. Last step in getting your credits transferred is your transcripts. At the end of everything, you'll get a transcript from your program. Most importantly, these need to be sent directly to us. So directly to Education Abroad. You can also opt to have it directly sent to the Office of International Admissions. They're the ones who enter in your grades and your credits at the end of everything. So it's always important to double check with your provider or your university abroad to make sure that they will send it to the correct place. Double check on when they're planning on sending it, kind of what their timeline is, right? And also, if you receive a copy of your transcript, be it in the mail or if it's an email, you cannot just forward it on to us. If you get a physical copy, don't open the envelope, right? In order to be considered official, that transcript needs to be sent directly to us, opened by us. Does that make sense? All right. If we get your transcript before we get your transient form, right, you'll see those courses kind of show up in your degree works in your unofficial transcript. But instead of credits and grades, you'll see no EQ, 1 NT, transient approval needed, right? That's kind of a red flag to you and to your academic advisor that you took classes, but you need approval first from your department in order to get them onto your transcript. Okay. All right. This all takes a minute. Okay. Be patient, be flexible. Since you're going abroad over the summer, talk to your programs and just get a sense of when you expect your transcripts to be ready. It might be a couple months before they're back to WVU. And then it has to go through being entered by international admissions and things like that. So if your academic advisors are expecting you to have certain prerequisites done in order for you to graduate, or I'm sorry, to register for certain courses later on, make sure that they know that there's going to be a lapse in time. Same with financial aid and scholarships, right? If your scholarships depend on you taking a certain number of credits over the summer, let them know that it's going to be a little bit of a delay between the time that you take it and the time that you earn those credits at the end. All right. Does anyone have questions? All right. Pop quiz. 1 second. I have my poll. Okay. Question number 1. Classes abroad are pass fail. All right. Courses abroad are not pass fail. That is false. You are earning credits and you are earning grades for everything that you take abroad. True or false? I should submit a new transient form if I add a new class. Yep. True. Good job. Yes, if you change your schedule in any way, you should submit a new transient form with that information. I can assume that my program abroad will automatically send my WVU transcripts. False. Good job, everyone. Yeah, never assume anything just in general in life. But also you want to make sure that they know where they're sending things. Sometimes we get transcripts sent to a building that no longer exists because Stansbury was demolished and that's where our office used to be. So make sure that the correct address and email address are on file with your institution. All right, last but not least, WVU accepts digital copies of transcripts. Great job. True. Yes, we accept digital copies of everything as long as it's sent directly to us from that partner university. And I will say at this moment in time, digital copies are preferred. So if they give you the option, tell them to email it to us because we're kind of rotating in and out of the office and things are a little different right now. Okay. All right. We have some quick travel tips here, just as far as like traveling well and being a good ambassador wherever you're going. So, of course, you should all get a passport. Make sure when you go abroad, you have that on your person. Your passport is different from your visa, right? Your passport says where you're from and that you can come back here and this is your citizenship. Your visa tells you how long and for what reason you can be in a country, right? Visas are different in every country you go to. Sometimes you can get one when you arrive in the airport. Sometimes you need to apply for one several months in advance and mail your passport off somewhere else. So check in with your provider company or your host university and check on what kind of visa you need. Ask what you need to do to get that visa and make sure you give yourself enough time to get one, okay? And if you are not a US citizen, make sure you're checking in with International Student Services to make sure that you're complying with your US visa requirements. As you're traveling, make sure you have your passport, first and foremost. Also bring a copy of your passport. You should have your visa and a copy of your visa. I say bring a copy because people lose things even when they don't think they ever will. We had an Australian student come here a couple years ago who lost her passport and had to go to DC several times using the information based on the copy of the passport that she had. So also bring a copy of your travel vaccinations and inoculations. At this moment in time, that's especially important. Make sure you have your kind of medical records with you. Bring photocopies of the front and back of your credit and debit card. Keep this in a safe place too, right? You don't just want it falling out anywhere, but it is good to have a backup in case you were to lose those cards and need to call and cancel them. Bring your proof of insurance. We'll talk about that later. And I always say some kind of like little in case of emergency cards. Something like if found, please return to Shelby Concepcion XYZ. I put these in my laptop case, in my backpack, suitcase, camera case, things like that. Megan, did you have a comment?
In addition to physical copies, I personally like to keep digital copies as well. Keep those in like a secure encrypted email, just in case like I do end up losing all of my documents. I can always log into like my email on a university computer or someone else's computer and pull up all of that information and have it all accessible in one easy location. Also, sometimes, as we mentioned earlier, once you land, that's when you receive your visa or they'll stamp your passport and it will have an identification number. I recommend taking a picture of that just in case something does happen. You do have that number and that will just make it easier to kind of move forward with whatever process needs to go forward once you lose that document.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. And of course, leave copies of everything at home. Make sure the people who love you and want you to be safe have access to anything that might be helpful in, getting you those documents back if you were to lose them. Nope. All right. As you're packing, it kind of goes without saying that you should pack under the weight limit. But I mean, seriously, under the weight limit. Just assume that you will be carrying everything that you're bringing with you. So it should be something that you can easily manage. Um, Only pack the essentials. A lot of things you will be able to buy once you're there. Um, Also take into account whatever like business closures may be in effect right now. Bring weather appropriate gear, right? If you're in on the opposite like hemisphere from us, then the weather is going to be opposite than what you may expect. And also your family would love you if you brought back souvenirs and gifts for them at the end of everything. In your carry-on, you should bring a change of clothes. Make sure you have travel-size toiletries. Make sure you're adhering to TSA's guidelines on what kinds of liquids and medications and electronics you can bring along with you on your carry-on. Okay. Does anyone have any good packing tips? Like, what do you do to make sure it all fits or you don't overpack?
What I do is like my luggage has an extender on it. So I make sure that like when I'm going somewhere, I'm not using the extender so that like when I'm coming back, there's gonna be like that extra like 2 or 3 inches of space when I am using it.
Awesome. Yeah, mine has that too. Anyone else? Helpful tips, tricks? Megan?
I'll share mine. I like to start packing early. So I try to get everything packed and planned out a week before, and I set it all out just so as like I pass by and I look at it, I can consider, do I actually need these items, or am I just taking them because they're kind of like it's something I think I need, but I don't actually need. And I kind of go through a process over like a few days, just taking things out that I don't need and maybe adding things that I had overlooked.
Thanks. I pack the day before. I am really not a prepared person. But I do roll my clothes to try to fit more, like create more space for other things. Also, when I spent a semester in Chile, I put like a duffel bag in the bottom of my suitcase so that if I needed extra space on my way back, I had an extra bag. I don't think I ended up using it, but like an extra duffel or backpack or something. Um, I'm trying to think what else. Other people have said that on Amazon they have like packing cubes that you can kind of stuff things in and it keeps your luggage organized.
Yep. I have
Yeah, there's
packing
lots of
cubes.
some
I
people have said. Go ahead.
I was just going to say,
Nice.
I have packing cubes and I find them quite useful, especially if like maybe you're going to do some like traveling on your way to or from your destination, like where you're staying in a hostel. It just makes it really easy to keep your bag all together and unpack as little as possible while you're in each location.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay. Money. You should give your bank a call. Let them know that you're planning on leaving the country. They'll want to know the dates that you're abroad. I say the country where you're studying and also any possible countries that you may travel to. If you're stopping in London on the way to India, then you should probably let them know that you'll be in London in case you want to buy a snack or something so that they don't cancel your debit card. You can get local currency from airports when you get there or before you take off. They don't always have the best exchange rates. It can turn out to be a little expensive that way. A lot of countries also have money exchanges, kind of like kiosks, out and about in the streets and near, busy areas. I tend to prefer just using ATMs. If you have a debit card and your bank knows that you're traveling, then you should be able to withdraw local cash at any ATM. There are international withdrawal fees, so it could cost you a little more, but I prefer to take out larger amounts at a time so that you don't have, stacks of withdrawal fees at a time. When you take money out of an ATM, separate out your bills and put them in different places, like different pockets, different places in your backpack. Try to separate out your money so that, God forbid, if something were to happen and you lost a little bit of it, you didn't lose the entire wad that you just withdrew, if that makes sense. Some banks in the US also allow you to pre-order like euros, for example. So you can give them a call and just see, what if that's a service that they offer, if it costs anything, and how much time they need to have in advance in order to order it. Okay.
Regarding money, I recommend traveling with multiple sources. So maybe take some US dollars and transfer or convert those over at the exchange, but also it's worthwhile to have, like if you have your debit card or a credit card, just having multiple sources in case something happens to your debit or credit card, you do have cash or another card to fall back on. Another thing to keep in mind is I recommend using ATMs that are connected to physical banks over stand-alone ATMs, just in case like the ATM ends up kind of eating your card. You can go into the bank and ask them to retrieve it for you.
Good call. I personally have a little bank in Indiana, is what my debit card is through, and my card did not work in Chile anywhere in any ATM. So that was like a setback for me, and I thankfully had cash that I could exchange, but I ended up having to walk into a bank and ask the bank teller if he could withdraw cash for me. And he had one of those like slidey card machines, and that's kind of how I made it work. So don't hesitate to walk in and ask someone for help too if an ATM isn't working for you, or if you need help finding a money exchange. Talk to people there. All right. Communication wise, check with your cell phone provider to see what kinds of international plans they have. I know that AT&T, for example, is my provider, and they have like a $60 a month international plan with certain amounts of like data and minutes that you can use. I tend to rely on Wi-Fi more than anything. And also, this is when I talk to my family and say, I'm going out of the country. I won't be in touch for a while. So make sure that your family knows what level of communication to expect from you. If you're used to talking to them every day or, once every couple of weeks or so, make sure that they know what your schedule is if you're in a different time zone, that you may not be texting them all that often, and that you're relying on internet access or, a limited plan to get that through. That's especially important right now. Since you're in a pandemic, they're probably going to be a little concerned of you being abroad, reasonably so, but I would recommend, establishing some line of communication with your family so that they know that you arrived well, like in one piece, and that you're safely on campus and that you're enjoying yourself, and that you're being safe while you're there. On another note, check in on whether or not you need a power adapter. There's a difference between an outlet adapter and a voltage converter, right? An adapter, and I wish I had one with me. I usually have several. An adapter changes the shape of the plug, right, that you're plugging into so that the appliance or whatever you have matches the outlet in the wall. A lot of countries have different voltage outputs than we do in the United States. This is especially a concern for like hair dryers and hair straighteners and hair products. If you have different voltages for the appliance versus the wall, you're gonna blow a fuse. If it doesn't work once, it won't work twice. I've had students try multiple times to get a hairdryer to work and blow fuses in multiple locations. So just be careful, make sure you know what the voltage is when you get there, and make sure you know what you're buying. Okay.
I recommend keeping a universal converter in your carry-on just in case like your flight gets moved from one airport to another, or like flights end up changing.
Harry has one. Awesome, perfect. Yep. Yeah, I made the mistake of trusting someone when I went to Australia. He said that he had Australian converters and they were not like adapters for Australia. So I was in an airport relying on USB ports, but I had to just like find an adapter in an airport. because they sell them there. They're just more expensive. All right. In the chat, what are 3 documents you should bring with you as you're traveling? Passport. What else? Visa. What else? Vaccines. Very good. Copy. Yes. Awesome. Good job. What are 2 options for exchanging money in the chat? ATM, airport. Awesome. List 1 packing tip in the chat. Cubes. Very good. Rolling clothes. Yes, I'm glad that one stuck. Cool. Awesome. Good job, you guys. All right. Now on to some health concerns. Obviously, there's a lot happening in the world right now. We want you to be as equipped as possible as you're traveling. Stop me if anything is confusing or if I don't cover a question that you have. You all, as traveling students through WVU, are covered with travel and health insurance through an emergency services provider called International SOS. Okay. They have a website that's amazing. I would recommend checking them out. They have like cultural tips, they have health advisories, travel advisories. You do not need to do anything special to enroll or to activate your membership with ISOS. All you need is your member ID number, which is this number right here. And I would also recommend putting this phone number in your phone. They also have an app. So if you download the ISOS app, it'll give you the local ISOS number for while you're abroad. You can also put in the countries that you're traveling to, and you can get text or email alerts for wherever you're at. And you can kind of just see what's going on while you're there. Excuse me. You have coverage for anywhere outside the US. This does not include airports in the US. So if you're in the Pittsburgh airport on your way out of the country, ISOS does not cover you, okay? Some programs or some countries require you to have like a national insurance while you're abroad. Talk to your program provider and just double check if that's a requirement for you or not, okay? Just kind of depends on the country and what those regulations are. Any questions about ISOS in particular? We'll send out this information as well. Okay. So, concerning COVID, you should be following the CDC and the World Health Organization guidelines at all times. You should be right now anyway, but the precautions that you're taking are not just for yourself, it's also for the other travelers around you. You're going into busy airports, you're going to be in a period of adjusting to a new bubble or a new pod of people, right? There are people coming from different places, and it is your responsibility to respect them and take precautions to help mitigate any kind of spread of the virus. You're also responsible for knowing the regulations and the guidelines and the local laws pertaining to your program and where you're going. Airlines have regulations. Make sure that you know what the airline that you're traveling through requires of you. That includes mask and sanitizer usage, that includes social distancing, that includes if you need to have a negative test or proof of a vaccine, that includes if you need to quarantine once you land. Different countries have different guidelines and local legislations. Make sure that you're wearing a mask just out of good practice, but also that might be a local mandate. Some countries have curfews right now. Make sure you know what those laws are. Make sure you know if businesses will be open and accepting, clients. Also, make sure you're aware of what the penalties are for violating any regulations, whether intentionally or otherwise. You should also talk with the organization that's facilitating your program. So if you're traveling through a third-party program like ISA, AIFS, API, you should check with them and make sure that you're familiar with their policies. Check with the university that's hosting you. Make sure you know how they're handling the situation. Make sure you know if there's on-site clinics where you can get tested or you can get immunized, or what their procedure is for if you've been exposed to COVID. Also, WVU and also your hosts have the right to cancel your program if, a travel risk committee has assessed it and, determined that the situation in that country just isn't safe anymore. Okay. For the time being, all of your programs have been evaluated and determined to be running, right? But as we've learned from the past year, anything can happen on the turn of a dime, right? So you should be up to date with the local news, with what's happening in your country. And feel free to contact us if you have any questions or concerns before traveling. Feel free to contact ISOS as well if you have concerns about, your upcoming travel. They should have some resources and some information for you before you go. But that's our statement on COVID. Are there any concerns or other questions that I haven't addressed? Okay, we'll move forward. Other health concerns, because there's other things beyond the pandemic. Make sure you're bringing your ISOS identification. We'll send you a copy of that. You should bring any medications that you have in their original bottles. Okay, don't dump a bottle of pills in a Ziploc bag and throw them in your carry-on and hope for the best. Also, make sure that you're bringing enough for your entire trip. So talk to your doctor and just ask if you need to have any kind of prescription filled for more than just your standard dose. You should also talk to ISOS about your medications and see what the possibility is of getting those prescriptions filled abroad, if that's a requirement. Also see if there's any kinds of restrictions on those medications. I know, for example, Adderall is a controlled substance in Japan. So that's something that's really common here in the US. So double check with ISOS or with your program provider to make sure you're up to date with those like health needs that you have. And I also say bring a little box of Band-Aids or something, right? You never know you need it until you need it. If you have any kind of accommodations that you need for a learning or a physical disability, make sure you're in touch with accessibility services at WVU. You can talk to me, you can talk to Megan. I would also talk to your program provider about what your needs are and how we can meet those. And make sure that you're familiarizing yourself with mental health services and counseling services where you're going, right? Your provider should have information on that. There should be, services available on campus, but make sure you know how to find them, especially since, things are weird in the world today. So it's better to know how to access those services before you need them desperately, okay? And then immunizations. You should double check with the CDC for what recommended and required vaccinations there are to go to your country, okay? Just about everyone is recommended to get the measles vaccine, your routine vaccines, Hep A and Hep B, which I think you probably needed to get into college. So you should have, record of those. Double check with your doctor, make sure you don't need any kind of updates. There is a travel doctor available in student health on Evansdale campus. So if you guys are interested in learning more about specific travel health, precautions for the location that you're going, you can talk to an actual travel doctor here on campus. And like I mentioned, you should check with your host country and your host organization about whether you need to have a negative COVID test, if you need to have a vaccination record, or if there's any kind of quarantine period when you get there, okay? And as you all should know by now, if you are a student 18 or older, you're eligible to get a vaccine through WVU. So I would recommend everybody go ahead and just schedule an appointment, because that's a good thing. That's a really great thing, okay? Any questions about health? All right. As far as just safety and personal safety, there are several places where you should log your travel. First of all, in your WVU Abroad application, there's a place where you can log your itinerary. And this may only become, I think this only becomes available for you to edit once your status has been changed to committed. So we'll change your status and there will be new things to do. But you can enter in your itinerary Make sure you're keeping me and Megan up to date with any changes. Like if you're planning on doing a weekend trip somewhere, make sure you're doing it safely and letting the right people know. And then Megan, I'll let you talk about STEP registration since you just learned a whole lot about it.
So the Department of State offers a service called the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, or STEP. So you can enroll through this link, and part of the enrollment process is you'll put in your mixed email address, but also it will ask you for the place that you will be residing while you're abroad. So if you know like your host family or where you're going to be living, your student department, or you can simply put in the university. Through this program, the Department of State will send you specific information and updates related to your country and region. So right now, a lot of updates are regarding COVID and curfews. So if you're trying to stay up to date on like what time curfews go into effect, what days, or any adjustments related to that, they send out all of that information as it comes to them. In addition, if there are any like safety concerns, or if there are protests, or just anything worth knowing happening in the area, they will send you an email update. Also, if there are any emergencies in country where you need assistance, this is an easy way for them to contact you through this program.
Okay. All right. For the safety side of things, practice self-awareness. Obviously, there's a lot to take in as you're exploring a new country. Want to see, everything that you can and get the most out of it. This is probably not the time to bring your grandmother's heirloom pearl earrings with you that can never be replaced, right? Bring reasonable things in your luggage. I would recommend keeping your money and any valuables in like the inside pocket of your backpack. And it looks stupid to some people, but like carry your backpack in front of you. I personally enjoy fanny packs. So if you want to make that kind of statement, then you can. Don't flash around any kind of valuables. And this can also be just a matter of respect for the culture that you're going into. When I traveled to Spain, we stayed on a university campus where the dorms had like housekeepers that would go in there and clean the rooms. And myself as a grad assistant and the faculty leader were approached by some of the housekeeping staff saying your students are leaving cash on their desks. Like they're just leaving cash out in the open, and it's making us uncomfortable. So sometimes this, keeping your valuables hidden isn't necessarily a fear tactic. It's also out of respect for the people that you're around, and exercising, that kind of trust. Be aware of your surroundings, especially at night. It's exciting to go out and explore. I frequently get lost just because that's my nature, but make sure that you're traveling with people who you trust. Make sure you have a way to get back to where you need to be. And trust your instincts when you don't feel comfortable with something, okay? Make sure you know where and to whom you can go for help and support. Make sure that you're practicing the same behavioral rules, perhaps even more so than some folks in Morgantown do. Know that the drinking age is a little different in a lot of other countries. Be responsible, know your limits, know what's culturally appropriate, right? And also practice safe sex. This is really not the time to go making risky decisions. And Megan also mentioned that the embassy can also help if you were to be the victim of a sexual assault.
Right. Yeah. So the U.S. Embassy, of course, once you enroll in STEP, it will tell you what embassy is closest to you or what consulate. I always think it's important to, before you travel, look up that information and maybe save it in your phone, like their location and their phone number, because they are available to you as a U.S. citizen 24/7. If you run into, like if your passport is stolen or lost, they are the people who will be there to help you. And if you are unfortunately the victim of a crime, you can contact the U.S. Embassy and they will be able to help work with you and provide services to help deal with that situation.
Okay. So, I mean, that's kind of like self-preservation, but also think about safety-wise, being just culturally aware. Know what's appropriate where you're going, what behaviors are acceptable. I know, for example, in Latin America, it's offensive to point at people directly. So make sure that you're just being a culturally sensitive person when you're there. ISOS is an amazing resource for this. They have all kinds of tips and tricks for how to integrate into the culture where you're going. Try not to participate in protests and rallies. Be respectful of differing cultural, political, and religious views. Everybody around the world has just different perspectives of everything that's happening right now. And on that topic, you will probably be asked how you feel about those things. So it's absolutely encouraged to have those conversations and to engage with people and learn how their perspectives interact with your own experience, and know how to answer those questions. There's a lot happening in our country right now that you'll probably be asked about. I was in Australia a couple years ago and I had coffee with another, education abroad administrator, and she just like sat down and was like, okay, so how do you feel about this? And like had listened to podcasts and like all these news things. And I'm like, oh man, okay. So you will be asked, and it may not be the most sensitive question that you've ever received either, but be open to that, be open to those conversations. And also know that you're representing a lot of different places. You're representing the United States, your family, the university, your future career, right? So take those things into account as you're traveling.
I'd also like to add that we're also resources. So if you have questions about local culture, we've been all over. So we are more than happy to tell you about our experiences and answer any questions you might have.
Yes, I think Megan is probably more well-traveled than I am. But between the two of us, we have experiences like around most of the continents. So if you ever just want to sit and chat and pick our brains, we have stories to tell for days. All right. So in the chat, number one, where can you find information about local COVID-19 guidelines and regulations? I want at least 2 answers. Nobody. CDC, very good. Anywhere else?
I'll add one that I don't think we mentioned earlier. Travel.state.gov-destinations will allow you to search your specific country, and it should bring up all of the COVID and health related information.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Also the World Health Organization, also ISOS, also probably your program coordinator or program provider. Okay, in the chat. Or actually, if somebody wants to unmute and give a thought, you have a minor illness and you want to go to the doctor, what do you do? Chat, or you can unmute. Who do you call? Any thoughts? This number that we took a picture of before, ISOS. We all know what ISOS is, right? That's knowledge that we have now. Make sure that you call International SOS, get a feel for, what kinds of doctors are, available to you. You can also talk to, your program coordinator and ask what they know about the local clinics and where you should go. Okay. What are 3 ways to avoid threats to your safety? Monitor surroundings. Absolutely. Don't flash valuables and things like that. Very good. I'd also say travel with people you know. Make sure you put in the local 911 into your phone, right? Know your local emergency assistance provider, ISOS, right? And where are at least 2 places where you should log your travel. Anything? WV Abroad, yep, in your application. Also, the State Department in that STEP program. It was step.state.gov. And also ISOS, right? Always ISOS. Okay. We're coming down to the home I just completely lost that analogy. I'm so sorry. Home stretch. That's what it is. We're almost done here. I did want to chat just for a second about culture shock. Hands up or thumbs up or some kind of signal if you've ever experienced culture shock. Aaliyah has, Megan has, Adam has. Yeah. Aaliyah or Adam, do either of you want to, Jordan has, anyone who's ever experienced it, do you want to give a quick anecdote of how that was, what the experience was like?
Yeah, I don't mind talking about it. So I'm from like the deep south, nowhere, Alabama. And when I came up here, it was a culture shock for me because I was from a town of maybe like 1,000 people. And coming to a college campus of 30,000 was just wild for me. At first, I was in love with it, like nothing had changed. And then the more I was here, the more it was like, wait a minute, this is completely different than anything I'm used to. Like, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how it was for me. It was just like a complete shock of what did I get myself into?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I'm really appreciative that your experience is domestic, like from the US to a different part of the US. Like I think a lot of people overlook that starting college in itself or starting a new job or starting in a new field is a form of culture shock. Does anyone else want to share? All right. I'll kind of walk through my, personal understanding and personal experience. If anybody ever wants to jump in and add to it, please do. Generally speaking, there's 4-ish stages of culture shock. Culture shock is that like discomfort that you experience when you're in a completely new place where you don't know how to move through society in a way that's, quote unquote, acceptable to the host culture. So the 4 stages are the honeymoon stage, frustration, acceptance, and adaptation. Sorry. Honeymoon is exactly like what Aaliyah said, where you think everything is great, you're kind of taking it all in, and you're really enjoying just all the novelty of it. And then that frustration sets in. This graphic calls it irritability, which I like because I can get irritable when I'm experiencing culture shock, where it's like, I just don't know like nothing I do seems to be right. Nothing seems to be easy or apparent for me as I'm trying to, just move through life. Acceptance is kind of that stage where you start understanding that culture for what it is and saying, okay, like I understand why they do this. It makes me a little uncomfortable still, but like, okay, that's their thing. And then adaptation is when you actually start taking on those traits yourself. So I guess one thing that kind of stands out to me is I've spent a lot of time in Latin America, and it's just an incredibly physical, touchy culture. I'm not a physical, touchy person. So, at the beginning, it's all exciting. Like you're in Latin America, everything's beautiful because everything there is perfect. But then that frustration sets in where it's like, I don't want to kiss every single stranger on the cheek. I just can't do this anymore. Like, I don't want to hold your hand. I don't want to be like touching you like at all times. I'm just done with this. And then acceptance is like, okay, that's fine. This is how they behave, and that's all right. That's acceptable. And then adaptation is when you actually start hugging people more, kissing people on the cheek. When I first moved back to the States, I started like going in for the cheek kiss, and I was like, oh wait, hang on, you don't want that. So taking on those traits themselves. Also, once I started learning Spanish, I started talking with my hands a lot more, which it doesn't, convey as well in Zoom, but that's an example of adaptation. And then at the end of everything, once you're back into your quote unquote home country, you may go through reverse culture shock, which is when you're then readapting to those traits that you were comfortable with before, because you have that outside perspective and it suddenly feels unnatural, right? Did you have a comment, Megan? I thought you.
For me, going through like the stages of culture shock while I was in like my host country and host community, it felt kind of natural. Like, of course, you're going to feel a bit uncomfortable and things like that. But what I wasn't expecting was reverse culture shock coming back. And I just remember my first trip to the grocery store. It was like a Kroger. In the salad dressing aisle, there are so many options. You don't need that many options. I just remember feeling very overwhelmed and being very aware that this was something that was very different from the community I had just departed from.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of funny, objectively looking back now.
Oh yeah,
Salad
absolutely.
dressings.
Salad dressings. Yeah, for me, it was the drive back from the airport after living in Honduras for 3 years in like dirt roads and things like that. The ride was so smooth. I was like, I can't even feel us moving. And I was like, this is different. This is weird. So essentially, there are all these external triggers, right? You're experiencing new climates, new food, language that you may or may not speak or may not have thought that you spoke. There are different values. Some places don't value independence like in the way that Americans do, for example, dress and the behaviors that they have. So as you're internalizing all of this, you may have actual physiological symptoms of, not sleeping well, not eating well. You may have more psychological symptoms where you're irritable or you get heightened anxiety. When I was in Chile for a semester, I tended to withdraw. My host mom had to check on me every once in a while and be like, are you going to leave the house? Like, is this okay? So the, kind of end, conclusion to all this is just make sure you know yourself enough to know if something is off. If there's something that you're already dealing with here where you're comfortable, and then you go abroad, there may be external factors that would, heighten those symptoms. So just be aware of it, know the resources that you have around you and how to use those to, help you actually get the most out of this time that you have, this incredible experience that you have, okay? Does anybody have any good coping strategies? Since those of you who have experienced culture shock are presumably through the weeds now, like you're done with that. What makes it better? How do you get through that? For example, oh, go ahead. Never mind. Sorry, I thought I saw one. When I studied abroad for a semester in Chile, I got so sick of Spanish and I had to bring books in English, and like I would listen to music in English that I wouldn't hear on, the radio or in public. So I think I needed to get back into a comfort zone where I felt okay about being, somewhere where I didn't thrive.
I like to take peppermints with me when I travel, and I just keep those in my purse or my backpack wherever I'm going. So if something is stressing me out, or if I'm like in a really cramped bus and it's just not a great situation for me, I'll just have a peppermint, and it's kind of like a 30-second little reprieve from whatever's going on, so I can kind of collect my thoughts and get back in the game.
Awesome. Anyone else? These are a few things. Everybody is different. Everybody's going to experience things differently. I mean, you may not even notice any difference at all with culture shock. And I mean, that's amazing. You may have worse problems with reverse culture shock like me. And that's, also something that is an amazing, like, growing opportunity. You learn a lot about yourself. But obviously there's all kinds of resources on the internet. There's us that you can talk to. There's going to be a lot of other folks in the exact same situation that you are while you're there abroad. So make sure that you're taking care of yourself in the end. All right. And then becoming intercultural. You're, theoretically traveling abroad to, kind of grow and develop as a person who is global, who is culturally sensitive, and is intercultural. What does that look like in the end? It takes more than just spending a month in a country, taking some pictures, posting them on your Instagram, coming back, right? A lot happens in the in between. At the end, right, you're going to notice a change in yourself. Hopefully, you'll be a little bit more empathetic. You'll be an adaptable person who can react positively in situations of like stress or discomfort. You're probably going to be a critical thinker. You're probably already a pretty curious person, right? So these are just some practical ways to kind of integrate into that intercultural persona. First of all, recognize cultural differences. Recognize them, period, but then recognize them as that. As differences, right? In India, I spent a summer teaching Spanish, and I met a man who was pretty old, and he said, "Oh man, I heard the worst thing about Americans the other day." And I was like, "Oh boy, what did we do now?" And he said, "I read an article that children will abandon their parents when they're 18 years old and move out of the house and like leave." And I was like, "Oh, yes, we do that." And it took kind of a conversation of, okay, we have different values. A lot of times Americans value independence and being able to forage for yourself. And parents will actually push their kids out of their house by the time they're 18, right? They want them to grow up and have that independence. So it's a different value system. It's not that we're better than Indians. It's not that Indians are better than us. It's that we have different value systems and we interact in that family structure differently. So yeah, that kind of gets down to, figuring out what the root value is, why those differences exist. You're going to have to, like, again, he did not present that to me in a very like pleasant way. He didn't ask me something in a really sensitive way, but you're going to have to, those spaces and that trial and error where you just have to kind of think on your feet and really internalize, okay, where is this coming from and how can I react and how can I grow from this, right? So allow space for communication, miscommunication, for making mistakes, and asking questions. Okay, that's my little soapbox. Launch you back at the end of everything. We do have a student organization called the Education Abroad Student Ambassadors. If you're ever interested in meeting up with other students who have studied abroad, who want to study abroad, a lot of times they hang out with our exchange students, like international exchange students who are on campus. Make sure you get in contact with us for that. And then, very last thing, if you want to add a certificate to your existing degree program, the Office of Global Affairs facilitates the Global Mountaineers Certificate. This is essentially a certificate in global competency. So you're just tacking that onto your degree. If you're like, I'm a psychology major with a certificate in global competency, you have the ability to navigate those different spaces and those different cultural, values and components. It's really not a lot of extra legwork. One thing is you have to study abroad, which you're working on doing. There's a 2 1-credit classes that are just talking about global competency and kind of integrating those experiences that you've had abroad. There's a language requirement. So if you're already having to take 6 hours of Spanish or French or Italian, that should be pretty easy to get out of the way. And then there's like a core component, which is any kind of international, globally focused class on campus. So a lot of them happen to be GEFs. So you may already be taking them. So all that to say, you're probably already well on your way to getting a certificate. It's just an extra thing to add on to your resume and have it under your belt when you're looking for your future career.